So welcome, everyone. I am Pat Soldano, president of Family Enterprise USA. We promote and represent all family businesses, all sizes, and all industries at a national level in Washington, D.C. I am very pleased to have with me today for this webcast, Sherry Bevino, who's the owner and CEO of Global A1 Flagship Company, a Department of Defense contractor currently holding 4 prime contracts with the Navy. Global manages the Navy's interactive fleet at 3 sites in the United States, in Pennsylvania, Washington, and Hawaii. In addition to managing the interactive flights, which Sherry, you're going to have to tell us what that means, Global provides support for the Navy's Energy Ship Salvage Maintenance Program, which also you're going to have to explain that as well. Global has 500 employees in the continental United States, Alaska, and Hawaii, as well as pre-positioned warehouses around the world. Over the past 7 years, the Orange County Business Journal has named Global as the top 10 of Orange County's top women-owned businesses. So, Sherry, congratulations for that.
Thank you.
So we have also with us today Paige Navarro, who is currently the Assistant Vice President at Global A1 Flagship. After many years of being interested in the business and visiting the sites in her free time, Paige officially joined the Global team 4 years ago. Her current role focuses on business development, and she leads the company's bid and proposal processes. Paige currently lives in Southern California, but she spent the first years of her professional life and career in Chicago working in the hospitality, real estate, and tech business. So we're going to get right into it, and I'm going to start by asking Sherry to give us a background on the history of the business and explain to us some of these terms we just talked about and the locations and the employees and where those employees reside.
Great. Thanks, Pat, for having us today. So Global was a family-owned business even before I made it my own family-owned business. It was started in the 1980s in a combination of a construction company and a Department of Defense contracting company, and really started out. It was the first generation of when Global began was a trucking business and delivery business, which then expanded into construction with the first generation. The second generation then used that construction history to win some Department of Defense bids, and primarily built the ICBM, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile System, silos across the northern part of the United States. In some large DoD contracts, because they went into construction and then into, and part of that construction was cement and concrete, then that led to these defense contracts. Then expanded into building some runways on the island of Kwajalein, and that expanded into having the entire Navy contracts for the operation of all of the schools, hospitals, housing, and all of the Navy activities on the island of Kwajalein, which then allowed them to expand into other Navy defense contracts, mostly Navy. Then the third generation came along and expanded that government business into DOL, Department of Labor contracts, training out of work at-risk youth through Job Corps centers. And so he bid and built the government contracting side of the business around this training of at-risk youth. And that was really his passion. And as a third generation, he had less passion for the defense contracts, more passion for the education and training business, and had begun winding down the old construction business. And that's kind of where I came in. I came on to work for the company as a VP of operations and was working in the defense side when the administrations started to set aside contracts for small business in order to create more competition. I think we've all heard the stories about the $300 Boeing hammers and all of these things that were occurring in the 70s and 80s with the large government contractors. So I think it was during the Bush administration, they started to set aside contracts for small businesses, veterans, disabled veterans, minority-owned, women-owned. And as a result of the third generation focusing his efforts on the education and training business and not so much on defense, and we were, there were certain contracts we couldn't rebid and win because they had small business set-asides. I found that an opportunity, asked to purchase one of those contracts and become a woman-owned small. And that's what I did. So I took the defense side of Global with me when I purchased Global, and I became a woman-owned small business in 2005. My original contract was, as Pat introduced, was I had one contract where we managed the inactive, a part of the Navy's inactive fleet, which means that when the Navy's ships become old or the technology is not as good as it should be, the weapon systems become old, and the Navy decides to retire that ship, then one of several things happen. But they always come to one of our inactive ship sites in order to be either disposed of. Sometimes we make museums out of them. We have sunk them to be reefs off the coast of Florida to protect from erosion, and they grow coral, and the Navy's and the divers like them. So we do whatever the Navy wants us to do with these ships as they come out of service. So my first contract was in Philadelphia. It was about 40 employees and about $6 million a year. That was in 2005. Since that time, we were successful in bidding 2 other inactive ship contracts for the Navy. There are only 3, so now we have all of them, which means we manage the entire inactive fleet for the Navy. And then in 2010, we acquired another very interesting contract. It's called the Emergency Ship Salvage and Maintenance Program, ESSM, and in that contract we it's a large logistics program providing equipment to support the Navy's divers, to support underwater ship husbandry and underwater ship repair. We support the salvage community, and we also do oil spill cleanup support. So, and other emergency environmental cleanup in that contract. So since 2005, we now have, as Pat said, close to 500 employees, and we operate around the world. We have manned operations in Virginia, Pennsylvania, Bremerton, Washington. We have 2 locations in Hawaii, Alaska, California, and then we have pre-positioned warehouses where we deploy people as needed in Spain, Sasebo, Japan, and Bahrain. Did I miss any, Paige?
Singapore.
Oh, in Singapore. So, so we have these pre-positioned warehouses around the world where if there was an emergency environmental cleanup that needed to be done and that country asks for the U.S. help, then the Navy comes in and we deploy people out then to help with those efforts.
Well, so Sherry, I mean, I have to ask the question. It's fascinating that you are one of the largest women-owned business in Orange County, and I'm sure probably in the state, if not the nation. And yet, and here's your daughter now going to succeed you in this business. And yet it sounds like a very male-dominated oriented industry. How is that? Is that the case?
Yes. Oh, very much so. And it's always interesting to me that when I'm in a group and oftentimes people ask me what I do and I explain it, and there's either crickets because they don't know what to ask next because they're a little uncomfortable with it, or they'll say, oh, you must have been in the Navy. And I always say, no, I wasn't in the Navy. And they say, well, what do you know about ships? And I say, well, I don't know anything about ships. But what I do is I think really at our level, and what Paige will have to do as well, is it's really about finding the right talent for those contracts, and we hire a lot of veterans, a lot of Navy retirees, and we bring in experts who know the ships and know exactly what needs to be done. And so we hire the right talent, we build systems around performance and rewarding people appropriately. And one of the most important things we do is we build a culture. We build a culture that inspires people, that creates a fun environment for work, and it has a lot of value. Our values are driven around that culture, and I think that's really the key to our success. And so I think sometimes it's better to not know anything about the ships, because I truly value those experts that work for me, and that's part of the key, I think. So.
Well, I'm going to switch to Paige, because Sherry, you mentioned the 500 employees, and one of the questions that we get asked is around generational employees. And we have found through the survey work that we do at Family Enterprise USA that 72% of family businesses have generations of employees working in their business, and which is amazing to me. So Paige, maybe you can talk about that a little bit as it relates to global.
Yeah, absolutely. So not only do we have some significant generational employees at our sites, but I do want to note also the longevity of a lot of our employees in our corporate office. We have about 10 people in our corporate office, and 8 of them have worked for Sherry for over 15 years. So I think that says a lot to the culture that she was talking about. And then out on the sites, we have extensive longevity as well. And when you have that longevity, it plays into safety, institutional knowledge. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can gain from that. But in terms of the generational employees out at our Virginia site, we have grandfather, father, son. We have father-in-law, daughter-in-law, mother, daughter, son. Philadelphia, we have uncle, nephew, father, son. Bremerton, father, son. Pearl Harbor, we have 2 sets of mother, son, daughter. So that's kind of cool, the whole family too. So a lot of generational employees throughout all of our sites.
Well, that is really fascinating. I find that, I think it really speaks to the culture that you both talked about. Is they obviously feel it's a good culture, it's a safe culture. You obviously instill those kind of values that they want the next generation of their family to be working in the business. So Sherry, it sounds like maybe talent is not one of your biggest impediments to growth, because it sounds like everybody stays around. So what has been the biggest impediment to growth for you?
I think for us, as a Navy contractor, one of the hardest things as a small business to grow into a larger business is the complexity of the proposal preparation. The government puts out a request for a proposal, and sometimes we can spend anywhere from, I would say, a minimum of 50 to 100,000 up to $250,000 just preparing a proposal for one contract. The cost proposals are complex, and the requirements are complex. So that's one of the hardest things in terms of growing. The other piece is trying to be cost competitive. The taxes and I just was going over with my CFO the other day some of the largest pieces of cost to the company, between the federal and state and local and county and sometimes city taxes. And then Washington State has a specific business tax, and other places we have excise taxes, and then sales tax, and pretty soon you have so many layers of taxes that just to prepare a cost proposal, it's hard to, you want to be efficient, but that efficiency can't even get close to the numbers that you're paying through taxes. So I think that doesn't help us grow. A lot of small businesses, I believe, are service businesses, and they're like, because I know a lot of peers in my group. I mean, they're landscaping companies, they're electrical businesses, they're plumbers, they're these people that have built these families that have built up these service businesses, and we don't have the same kind of tax advantages in a service business as a large manufacturing does, with depreciation and a lot of equipment. And you know, you read these stories about the Googles and the Microsofts, and there's years when they don't even pay taxes. And when you're in a small family-owned business and it's a service-related business, there are no tax advantages. I would love to have some incentives to help us continue to grow. One of the other impediments to us now is that we haven't been defense spending over the last few decades as heavily, and we haven't been building Navy ships. So the shipyards where we operate, for instance, in Philadelphia, the shipyard has gone away, and so we have fewer shipyards and we have fewer mariner kinds of skill bases. And so we have a hard time, although we have people that have worked for us a long time, it's very hard to replace people when they leave, because I don't have those mariner skill bases to draw from anymore. And it would be, you know, it would be very helpful to have some kind of relief in terms of being able to train or create apprenticeships around these kinds of jobs, because they're very difficult to find. Cost of capital is a big impediment to growth. The cost of capital is rising and rising now. And, you know, if you're paying 8% for your operating money in our contracts with the Navy, we pay for everything ahead of time, and then the Navy reimburses us later. And we all know the Navy, that the government isn't always the quickest to respond. So sometimes we're carrying those costs for a very long time. When the cost of capital gets up around 8% for our operating loans, it significantly impacts our ability to have a decent margin, and the risk that we take becomes greater. Those are probably some of the most significant ones.
Well, since you mentioned it, let's just go right there to legislation, regulation. How can Congress help you in that area, provide better, more pro-business, maybe legislation, regulation? You mentioned taxes and other kind of regulations. How can they help you run your business better?
I think a big piece would be, there are many of the small businesses that are what we call subchapter S businesses. And a subchapter S business means that our business income flows through to our personal tax return, which means then that we are paying ordinary income tax rates on our business income. And as opposed to the corporations who have a 21% tax rate, I might be paying a 37% or higher taxes as it flows through to my personal income. I would love to have Congress recognize the value of what small business brings and provide us some kind of a tax incentive to be a family-owned business. And another thing that's very discouraging as a family-owned business is the ability, especially with Paige, to have succession, because the way the death taxes work, if I pass away and the value of my business, Paige takes over that business and inherits that business, sometimes many people have to sell the business just to pay the taxes. So we have to constantly be planning and figuring out ways that we can protect her, so that if something happens to me and she's been running this business, that she can continue to run it and keep it going and keep all these multi-generational employees employed, and all these people that have worked for us for more than 15 years. I'd like to see the government actually incentivize us to have a family legacy as opposed to penalizing us for it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, income tax, we have learned, to your point, 80% of family businesses operate as a pass-through entity, either an S Corp or an LLC. So they are doing just as you're doing, which paying this 37% versus the 21%. And that's why income tax is a #1 issue for family businesses. And then the estate tax, as you mentioned, you really want your business to be a legacy. All family businesses want their business to be a legacy, and the gift and estate tax almost discourages against that. So it's good to hear that you focused on that. Members of Congress are listening. As you know, we formed this Congressional Family Business Caucus. We're really hopeful that people like you will come to DC, tell their story to these members of Congress, as we've been having do over and over again, and they will hear and they will learn and they will understand, just as you said.
There's another really big area too, I'd love to mention. You know, the health insurance and providing health benefits in our country, this system is broken. It's an employer paid for system, and as an employer, I can tell you it's broken and it doesn't work. Every year, I'm paying more to provide my employees less. And it's become very frustrating to try to navigate through this. And we really need more competition. We don't need single payer programs. We don't need reduced competition. We need more competition. If they could open up competition for across state lines for providing health insurance coverages, or something where there's an incentive to provide us good quality benefits for a reasonable price. That's one of the biggest costs we have as a small business. And it's also important to our culture. It's important to what we want to provide for our employees and their families. And that's another area where I would love to see substantial work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And to that point, let's talk about other workplace issues. You mentioned your employees. We've also found that 46% of family businesses pay better in terms of salaries and benefits to their employees. But certainly health insurance, as you've just described, is really, really an important issue. What are some of the other issues that you face in the workplace? And Paige, I'd like you to comment on that too, if you'd like.
Yeah, so I think in the workplace, we've found that unfortunately it is a bit more of a litigious landscape than we've experienced in the past. So with employees, it's challenging to make sure that everybody is heard and seen and understood, and that everybody's respectful in the workplace, and that we're actually here to specifically do a job and not let all of the kind of outside noise get in the way of that. So that would be a challenge. And I think Sherry also hit on it too, is the challenge of the trades dying out. We definitely see that when it comes to training and hiring and things of that sort. So
we used to have, and Paige is probably even too young but to remember this, but we used to have shop class in schools, and they used to offer some exposure to vocational jobs in the schools, which got people excited about doing those. A lot of our mechanics, they started out in getting that passion when they were very young, and putting some of those opportunities back in the education system would be helpful. There's other things. In California, we have to pay overtime over 8 in a day as opposed to 40 in a week, which happens in other areas. And when we're trying to meet employees' needs, people have family obligations, and sometimes they want to work 10 hours one day and take 2 hours off the next day to pick up their child from school or to go to a soccer game or have some flexibility. The laws seem to limit our flexibility every time we turn around. I had a recruiting business for a while it was actually very fun. I employed most of the employees in that business were women across the country. I was recruiting for a nationwide company, and they would want to work part-time. And I would have, where I might need 4 full-time people, I had 8 full-time moms across the country who worked certain hours. And then I always had backups for vacation. And if somebody got sick, it worked well. It worked well for the employees. It worked well to employ that piece of the community. But then when they instituted all of the restrictions on independent contractors, I ended up with 4 full-time employees, and I had to lay off the other 4 people. It seems as though there's some unintended consequences that I don't think were thought about in some of this legislation, that make it so inflexible for us that we can't even meet the needs that are good for employees and the company.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's more true here in California than anywhere else, I think. But that's a really, really good point. So why don't we switch now to community giving? We have learned that family businesses 82% of them give locally to a local charity or a local charity within a national organization. And I know both of you are very involved in the local community. I know, Sherry, you are the executive director of the OWL Foundation. So why don't you tell us how the company, how you all support the local community?
So probably one of the most impactful things I did was I was on the board of United Way in Orange County for the maximum amount of time I could be a board member, which was 12 years. And 3 of those years, I chaired the Women's Philanthropy Fund in Orange County to help direct the money that was coming in for specific causes that the women in the community were interested in. And in addition to that, as you said, I'm the executive director of the OWL Foundation, and the OWL Foundation's purpose is to invest in youth and education. So we've participated with Orangewood and the Samueli Foundation in building the Samueli Academy, and have done a lot of donating to the boys and girls programs, anything that falls within the mission of the OWL Foundation. We've donated a lot. I would say probably over the last 10 years, we've donated more than $1.5 million out of the OWL Foundation into the community. And of course, we, as Global, as a company, donated to United Way as all the years I was on the board there. So, and in addition to that, Paige actually headed up a program for all the communities that we operate in. So Paige, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so it was actually started during COVID. You know, all of our sites were remained essential. So everybody in our company was able to keep a job, which was a really big thing at that time. I think, you know, people express their appreciation of remaining employed during that really scary time when a lot of people were getting laid off. So in an effort to give back to our communities, we kind of did a fun little friendly competition between all of our sites all across the US. So the great thing about being a nationwide company is we can have an impact in a lot of different communities. So, you know, Virginia, Philadelphia, Seattle, Sherry mentioned all the locations, Hawaii, San Diego. So we let all of the project managers talk to their employees at the different sites and kind of decide what was the most impactful organization, or what, you know, held a special place in the hearts of the employees in their local communities. We didn't want to just say, okay, everybody donate to the Red Cross or something. We wanted them to have a little bit more excitement around it and connection to it. So each of the different sites picked a local charity, and the majority of them picked, you know, food banks, food lines, things like that. So they not only raised money, but also donated a lot of food to these organizations. And in addition, Sherry personally matched all of the donations that each of our different sites did as well. So that was a fun, and every week, you know, leading up to the donations, we kind of sent out a flyer to everybody. Okay, this many percentage of people have donated at this location, and everybody wanted to get their site up to 100%. And then we sent out the big checks, and we took the big checks to the sites and took pictures and put it in our newsletter and stuff, made it a really fun initiative. So I think that was a great way for us to be able to give back in a meaningful way during COVID, while still, you know, having all of our employees remain employed.
Well, and the employees themselves get a great opportunity to participate in the community with your help. And so that makes them feel really, really good about themselves as well. Sherry, you were going to say something.
I say, so the interesting part about that is many of them continued those activities beyond without the program. And so we still have things in our newsletter because those employees that have found their passion or got excited about it continue to do those things. And we sponsor, you know, golf tournaments in at sites for veterans, for donating money to veterans. We do a lot of things around veterans as well.
Well, so that's fascinating, and I commend both of you for being so involved in your community and helping everyone, helping people live their lives. So now I can't let you go without asking you about transition and succession planning. Every family business struggles with that. I know that you're at the beginnings of this, just having discussions around how this business could transition and maybe what that would look like. So maybe Sherry, you could start and Paige could add to it.
So I think one of the hardest things in a family business is when your child comes in, is everybody of that feeling of, oh, the daughter, she gets all the breaks and, she's going to be running everything now. And I think there's some initial kind of resistance to that. In my business, it ended up being different because our culture is so strong, and I've had all these employees that have worked for us for so many years that when I started to plan my exit, I was turning 65 and I was beginning to plan my exit. At that time, Paige had not expressed an interest yet. And so I was preparing the business for sale. And the hardest part was going to bed every night and waking up every morning thinking about who might purchase this and how they might treat my employees, or what they might do to this business that I've put my heart and soul into. And that was scary for me. And then Paige stepped up, and she had worked in the business when she was younger, in high school and college. And so she stepped up and said she had an interest, and it was just such a relief. And I think for especially the employees in the corporate office who knew that planning was going on, she came in with a whole different level of acceptance, because they were excited to know that she would carry that culture on. And I think that's one of the most important things, is for Paige has to establish her own place, and she had to demonstrate her own skills, and she had to start at the bottom, and she had to work at the sites, and they had to get to know her and get comfortable with I think the most important thing to them, which that she would continue it on in the same way. Now she's going to do things differently for sure, but when you have an environment that people enjoy coming to work in and they stay working for you. I've owned the business 18 years, and many of the people have over 16 years of service, so they want that to go on. But of course, the biggest impediment to us is the ability to financially transfer the business.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenges that I see moving into the business would be, one, continuing the culture and the core values, and ensuring that everybody that works for the company knows that that is my number one priority, to continue the way that it's been for the last over 15 years, and make sure that that side of the business doesn't change. There's some other challenges that I see the company facing in general. I think the change, or sometimes the shift in contract types that are coming out. So there's a lot more fixed fee contracts that are coming out. We try to stay in the cost plus type contract for anything that we bid on in the future. We want to ensure that we're able to give best value, not just lowest cost to the government. So that's definitely a direction that we want to stay kind of in that niche market. And then kind of also understanding where I want to expand the business in the future. I think, going in some of the direction of environmental salvage cleanup, that's a really interesting direction to me. But I want to make sure that everybody else in the company agrees with that and kind of sees that vision as well. So and then I think we've talked about it before, just the challenge of the trades. So those are kind of the three main challenges I see for myself moving forward in this business.
One of the benefits
go ahead, Sherry.
of having a young person, though, is having that technology piece. She's established a great degree of credibility through the technology that she suggested and brought to the business that I did not bring. And the employees are younger. And so everybody, my age group is aging out and her age group is coming in. So that there's a real benefit to that as well.
Yeah, technology is so very important today. their business and certainly the succession of any business. So this has been fascinating. I knew it would be, but I really appreciate both of you being on this video today. I know a lot of people are going to view it. It's fascinating, have a woman, such a large woman-owned business, and her daughter that's going to succeed her in the business, already working with her in the business. So I really appreciate you getting on this video with me today and sharing your business and your thoughts. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Pat, for giving us the opportunity to have a voice in DC and this caucus that you're building. We really want to continue to contribute to our communities and contribute to the American dream. And it's really, I think the family-owned business is just part of that whole, an important part of that.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate your support. Take care. Have a good day.